In this video I want to talk about using open source software and suffering. And when I mean open source, I of course rather mean free software, but open source is kind of a more popular term and a bit more catchier if you want. Yeah, so I used open source in the title, but really what I mean is free software. So yeah, free software and suffering, or maybe you could even broaden that a bit to like being enthusiastic about software in general and suffering. So yeah, free software and software, because I mean, if you've ever done anything like a bit more specific than maybe more specific than using Microsoft Office, you have maybe encountered something like this, like when you like search for a problem or a solution to a problem you have for hours on end, and then just to end up on some random forum with some post 17 years ago where the poster finally says, never mind, solved it, without actually giving a solution. So, and these kind of situations really, yeah, they are a kind of suffering, because you're trying to solve this and you're spending a lot of time and energy and nerves on this problem, but yeah, sometimes it's really an experience which you have to suffer through, or which you suffer through by your own will, if you want to. So for like a lot of people, me myself included, free software is a kind of passion. It's a kind of, well, hobby, you could say, but it's really, I think it's more of a hobby, at least for me. And I think passion is the right word here. So I would say I'm very passionate about free software. And I'm and not to go all linguistic here, because I'm not a linguist, but so passion in German means Leidenschaft, and you're gonna use this as kind of a starting point to get into what I mean, because, well, language tells you a lot about reality and how things are. And so, and it's the same with passion. So passion translated into German means Leidenschaft. And Leidenschaft, if you split it up, it like has two parts. So the first part is Leiden and the second part is Schaft. Well, and Leiden means suffer, or rather suffering. And Schaft means, well, something like create. So not really Schaft itself, but more like schaffen. So to create something is to, in German you would say etwas schaffen. Yeah, and again, suffering means Leiden in German. So the word Leidenschaft actually means like something to create out of suffering, maybe. Or you could say something like that, maybe, or the other way around. So, but these two words are part of it. And now you can look into like Latin, and I'm not a Latin speaker. But if you look at the word for Leiden, or the word for suffering, it's passio. And I mean, that's pretty, I mean, I don't know if you pronounce that, if you pronounce it like that, but that's, well, pretty close to passion. So there's kind of a, you're kind of getting a full round. So there is this, and I mean, passion and also Leidenschaft, like it's on the one hand, it's something like, for example, free software, or something like a topic where you're really into, but it also has this emotional component with it. So I mean, if you say you're passionate about something, is like saying you're emotionally invested in something. And also it comes with like an aspect of maybe irrationally invested. So you're emotionally invested, but you can't really explain like, why is this important? Like rationally, you maybe not be able to explain it. So yeah, let me think. What do I want to say? And yeah, so what I'm getting at is, if you're suffering, like in the beginning I said, you're suffering through a problem with your software because you have some esoteric bug with your NVIDIA graphics drivers or whatnot, and you just can't seem to solve it. You're in a sense kind of creating something. You're creating, if you want to put it like that, you're creating a knowledge. And you might say, well, what kind of knowledge is that if I then find out I've, like, I don't know, missed a semicolon somewhere, or a comma in some configuration file, or I finally found the forum post which gives me a solution to this problem. And I mean, yeah, it's maybe not like really that important knowledge because it's like very specific and very niche, so very specific to your problem. But still, you're kind of learning. Maybe you're learning the process of searching for stuff. Maybe you're learning how to ask stuff. Maybe you are learning about technology and how your computer works and how your software works and how it all kind of plays together. Like what directory, what kind of configs are in, and so on and so forth. So the suffering is in a sense creating something. It's teaching something. You're learning something, and yeah, that's what I want to kind of get to, the point I want to get to. So, and I think the key aspect here, or the key word maybe, is awareness. So you are getting more aware of the situation you're in and the software you're using. Because, yeah, suffering kind of forces you to become more aware. If you don't suffer, you don't really have any reason to be aware. You can be, well, mostly ignorant about the situation you're in. And I mean, this is the case for most people who use a computer nowadays. Obviously it is. I mean, how large is the number of people who use like something like DWM or VI or Emacs or just Linux in general, and who actually know what they are doing? Of course, it's a very small percentage of the general population, if you want to say that. And yeah, most people are ignorant about computing, and I made the other video which is about the year of the software, year of the desktop Linux, I think I call it, and what that really means. I also hit on this point, of course, because I think it is the most important, or one of the important points in this topic. And also here, again, so if you're not suffering, you don't really have any reason to learn. And the suffering with like free software in general is like self-imposed suffering, of course, in some sense, because you don't have to do that. Like society does not require you to sit down and, I don't know, search the internet for what library package to install so you can compile this and that piece of software. Like, that's not a requirement to exist nowadays. At least like in the most part. Maybe it is if that's your job or whatnot, but yeah, let's just let's not consider that, because I think that's kind of if you're in that situation, you already went through like a process of all of this. So yeah, it's suffering forces you to become aware, and this is, of course, this forcing is a kind of maybe you can even say like let me think. So forcing in a sense of ignorance can only be really like the only thing that opposes ignorance is like brute force or even like violence in a physical context. Because if you're ignoring something, you are actively not acknowledging it. And like in a let's say in a physical context, let's say you're ignoring someone, like this person has no way to reach you really, except when they become so loud or physical that you can't ignore them, that you have to act, or that you have to like respond in some way. And it's the same in this context of software, in some sense, in some abstract sense. So yeah, I think. And all of this is to say, I mean, suffering in this context really is not bad. Like, it's not evil. And I think that's an important point to understand. And I mean, suffering means pretty much like is maybe not like synonymous, but really suffering entails learning, I think. And I mean, there's another aspect of this, and that is failure and to fail. And that also has to do with learning, because without failing, you don't learn. Like, you don't learn by always being successful. Well, the first time, maybe. Because really, to fail is to, like, to see a possibility or a option that doesn't work. So you kind of go by, like, method of exclusion, where you just exclude all the the bad options, quote unquote. So everything that doesn't work, and in the end, you kind of converge on what does work in like some abstract sense. So failure is of course a big part of it, and this is of course part of suffering, because whenever, if we go back to the start, for like in some scenario where you're searching half the internet for some esoteric problem, well, esoteric quote unquote problem you have with your computer, you you stumble upon solutions and you try them out, and they of course they don't work, and you do this and again and again and again, and this is kind of the sufferous part. Where you're kind of like, yeah, you're kind of, it's kind of painful to like find another maybe solution and then try it out and see, well, it doesn't work on my system. And really, it's the same everywhere. Like if you program something and something doesn't work and it fails, you, of course, you're suffering in some sense, to some degree, but this leads you to learn, why doesn't this work? Like, why does this fail? And how can I do it so it doesn't fail? So it is a necessary requirement, I think. And I mean, if we go to like, and of course this is not, as I said, this is not software specific. Like this is very software unspecific. I mean, software is just one like aspect of the world where this general principle, if you want to call it that, also applies. So really, I mean, and this is one point, of course, you will, well, which is very obvious today, is that we are trying, like as a society and as like the general world, like everything is trying to reduce suffering, and like everywhere, because, well, suffering is bad for you because it doesn't feel nice or something. And like, again, even if you're looking at computers, like what is like Windows, Microsoft Windows and macOS really doing, if it is not like abstracting away all the technicalities that would lead you to suffer because something doesn't work and because you don't know why it doesn't work. So they want to make everything work out of the box. So you don't have to deal with any of it, but that also means you don't have knowledge of anything. You don't have skill. You don't have, like, you don't know jack shit about what your computer does. And this is like really the iPad future, where it's just this like black box. And I mean, computers are, of course, black. They like, I mean, for even for people who are in like free software and all this stuff, computers still are black boxes. I mean, if something breaks with your computer, like if something physically breaks, I mean, you're not gonna repair it probably. Maybe if you're like some kind of soldering wizard, which has like super skills with like all these SMD components. But I'm getting off track. So there you can see, but it's with everything else as well. Like even like something like your own, like the food you consume. If you apply these concepts of like abstraction and suffering to it, what is a supermarket if not an abstraction of how to get food? Like you don't have to deal with, well, now I need to plant these seeds because the weather is now good and it's this time of the year and so on and so forth. You just go in the supermarket and buy it and whatever. Like where does it grow? I don't know. Like whatever. And yeah. So this suffering, again, there also leads you to not be as knowledgeable, not be as skilled, not be as, well, yeah, independent. So it really applies everywhere. And software is just the kind of uber-specific niche we find ourselves in. Maybe. Because, like, and I think there are reasons why people, or also why I myself got into free software, which are beyond just maybe escapism, if you want to call it that. But I don't want to really go that deep in this video. Again, the point here is just suffering actually, like, there's a point to it. And the point is to make you become aware of stuff and to make you more knowledgeable and more skills of stuff. And again, this I think applies everywhere, not just in software, but of course it's obvious for people like us. in like people who actually try to understand all this stuff and how the computer works and what software they use, and who are like conscious about like privacy aspects and security aspects and all this stuff. So yeah, and with all that, I mean, with knowledge and skill comes the possibility to create. So it goes back to this this German word Leidenschaft, where your suffering really is in some sense creating something, and you can't really, yeah. And this is another point I want to hit on. You can't really get around that. I mean, this process of suffering through something, it's kind of, you have to go through it, otherwise you don't learn. Like, I mean, you can, of course, you can learn by reading, for example, what other people have done and what they haven't done in software, as in everything else. But to really learn something and to really understand something, I think you have to suffer through it yourself. Yeah, so also in with business stuff, with well, I'm gonna try this idea and see how it works, and other people tell you, well, it's a bad idea because this and that, and of course you don't listen to them because you think, well, no, it's a great idea, and you kind of only then learn by going through the process that maybe it wasn't a great idea, if you know what I mean. And I mean, that's not always the case. People will tell you, well, it's a bad idea whatever you do, like, doesn't matter. People want you to always play it safe. Yeah, and this is another point. If you only ever quote unquote play it safe and only go the path of least resistance, which is also the path of least suffering, because, well, resistance in this context, I mean, you can say it is suffering. If you only ever go that path, you end up not knowing, not knowing anything really. And this is also kind of the world we live in nowadays, where, I mean, people know stuff, but it's uber specific, it's super specific in their kind of niche in which they kind of went for their job or whatever. And I mean, software is the same thing, of course. I mean, this is a super specific niche. And it's not really applicable to anything outside of it. But I think that doesn't mean that software stuff is irrelevant in the context of the world, of course. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. What was I saying? Yeah, path of least resistance. So, yeah, and again, this is the world we live in, and which we are all part of course. I mean, I don't know how to grow my own food. Well, to some extent I do. I mean, of course, and everyone kind of does, but not really. You kind of have to do this stuff to learn it, and if you do this stuff, you end up suffering because stuff doesn't work out the first time ever, really. Yeah, but again, I think this is a necessary process you have to go through, in which you can't read or learn or anything. Yeah. Let me think. I hope this wasn't too chaotic so far, but I think that's pretty much all the points I wanted to hit on. Yeah, again, and kind of, I mean, this whole linguistic aspect of it, I think it's kind of, yeah, it does tell you something about the real world, really, if you think about it. So, yeah, this is, and of course, all of this is no coincidence. Yeah, many M's. Alright, I think that's it. I don't really have anything else to say, I think. So, yeah, again, suffer and fail and learn and do this stuff, because, I don't know, what else is there to do? I mean, isn't life really boring if you don't ever fail, if you don't ever try anything, if you don't ever suffer? I mean, what's the point? Just consume product all day? What kind of life is that? Yeah, so this applies to software, to free software, to everything else. Yeah, I think that's it. Have a nice day.